Sober October, Day 4, How Alcohol Affects Our Finances. Alcohol affects our wallet. This isn't news. Beer, wine, liquor, they all cost money. So when we cut them out, there's clearly a benefit to our finances. But how much? That's the question. And it's really the only question we're going to look at today. For a guy like me who is sometimes cheap, I prefer the word frugal. Saving money can be a real motivator to get me to do or not do something. Maybe it is for you too. Maybe it's not. But regardless, knowing how much you spend on alcohol is information, and it's helpful information. And you might be shocked at how much you're actually spending on alcohol. That said, here's the question today. How much do you gain financially from cutting out alcohol? There's a couple ways you could do this. If you're someone who actually tracks your expenses in an app or keeps records and receipts, then you probably have the information you need to get a really good idea of how much you've spent in the past. For the other 99% of us, this isn't happening. Even as a CPA who actually does track my expenses and I use Quicken and I keep receipts and all that, I couldn't figure this out because I tended to use cash to buy alcohol. I didn't keep the receipts. I couldn't have those records and that documentation just floating out there for someone to discover. It could tarnish my perfect and well-curated reputation. Plus, who honestly wants to be reminded of how much they're spending on this stuff? At the time, I didn't want to know. So, if you have all your receipts and all your records, I'm just going to assume you got this covered and you don't need me to explain math for you. But for the rest of us, we need to come up with a best guess on how much we spend. I like using a week as our time frame. Our routine and our habits, they're pretty consistent week by week. So if we figure out how much we spend on a typical week, we can get a good guess of how much we spend on the average month and year. Here's the thing though, people are horrible at guessing how much we spend. When people guess how much they spend on different activities or different categories and expenses, we almost always guess low. So here's what we're going to do. We're not going to try to guess the dollar amount. Rather, we're going to guess how much we consume. I'll use myself as an example. Regularly, when I was drinking pretty consistently, I was drinking probably maybe 2 packs of some pretty good craft beer weekly, and we'd maybe go through a bottle of wine weekly. Since I haven't stepped into a liquor store in a very long time, I had to look it up, but it seems like $12 for a 6-pack of craft beer is the average. So I'm going to go with that. That seems about right. When it comes to wine, I'm cheap. So I'll guess maybe 10 to 15 a bottle. That comes out to roughly $35 to $40 a week on alcohol based on what I think is an honest assessment of what I was consuming. Of course, there was the occasional bottle of liquor because liquor is quicker, and the random occasion, that required some more beer, like camping or holidays or being around certain unnamed people. I was never much into going out to bars or drinking at restaurants and stuff. Too expensive for me, way too cheap, but that is something you should consider. So if I spent on average about $40 a week, I'm rounding up because of the, random additional expenses. $40 a week is roughly $2,100 a year, $2,100 a year. I'm rounding to make it easy. But that's a lot of money when you think of it in those terms. Other ways you can think of it are based on how much you earn. So like how many hours are you working so you can earn enough to buy the alcohol at the rate you drink? If we're using $2,100, here's some examples. Here's some figures for you. If you make $30,000 a year, that's roughly 3.5 weeks of work. If you make $50,000 a year, that's roughly 2 weeks of work. If you make $100,000 a year, that's roughly 1 week of work. You get the point, right? So it's not just how much does it cost, it's how much of your time and your effort and your energy does it cost. And by the way, that's not even considering the fact that you only get some of the money you're paid, because of things like taxes. So those are low estimates. Now it's your turn. Here are the questions you need to figure out. What do you consume in alcohol in an average week? And be honest with yourself. It doesn't help you if you pretend that reality is something different than it really is. If you determine you drink whatever amount per week and you're kind of ashamed about it, it is what it is. So once you figure out how much you consume on an average week, what does that cost? You might have to pay a little more attention at the grocery store or liquor store and kind of get an idea of what it actually costs you per week. Multiply that by 52, and you have your annual alcohol costs. How many hours are you working to earn that money? Other ways you could think about this. What else could you get with that money? Could you pay off some debt? Could you save for a house? Could you take a trip with your family? Could you get that big item that you or maybe someone in your family really wants, but you've been holding off because you just can't afford it? These are great questions to think about. They will help you see the trade-offs and also what could be possible financially if you were to choose something like long-term sobriety. So that is it for today. I hope this episode was helpful, gave you some information that you can use. And as always, thanks for listening.